Oh, what happened to Sophia? Evening, everyone. Let me just prepare my deck. Okay. Afternoon. The screen. All right. Okay, we'll start in a minute. Actually, let's start now. No, I don't want to waste your time. The others can follow later. Hopefully, we'll get more people later. But thank you for joining. No, we have the usual crowd, and really thank you for joining me regularly. I'm taking note, by the way, so that might uh, help you, especially in the online participation. All right. Sige, a few announcements before we start the subject matter. No? Suggested pace. No? So we're down to the last two modules. I hope that most of you are already have already started module 4. No? So maybe finish that by April, by the end of the month. And again, the guidelines for assignment 2 are located there, no, at the end of that module. And then the shortest module, cover module 5, no, from for the rest, no, after, no, until May 14. Or, I mean, you can cover it even right before your finals or after. I mean, I'm making the course available until the end of May, so no worries about that. No synchronous class, obviously, on April 13. That's Holy Week. I will have a spring break there, no? Something like a spring break, no? Then just a heads up, no, and I'll be sending a sign up sheet, no, on Google Docs soon, no. Our class, no, our class schedule, no, on April 27 will be converted, completely converted into optional consultations, no, for assignment 2. No. I started doing this last semester because I computed it, we have like one sort of free day, no? So I'll devote that. Again, it's optional. It will be like 20-minute consultations, no? If you have questions, issues, no, regarding homework 2, ask me, no? During that session. No? So last semester, I had 2 classes. So for one class, all the groups, no, all the 5 or 6 groups actually consulted with me. For the other, it was only 2 or 3 out of 5. So again, it's optional, but it might help. Uh, and then May 18, no, I think you had, based on your schedule, you have the study days from May 16 to 18. No? So I'm converting the May 18. Again, that is completely optional talaga. No? Ask me anything. No? So I'm making myself available. I'll be online in case you have questions about the course, any topic, no? Even outside the course. No? If you want advice on career paths, no, some yeah, advice, no, life advice, student advice, no, especially if you are also interested in going to development. So others, no, in my last semester, no, some actually asked me about personal stuff, like yun nga, they wanted to pursue development work, or some of them wanted to do masters in development. So some tips, no? So that's an ask me anything session. Wag lang love life. No? Don't ask me about that. Mahina ako dyan. So yun. All right. So we can jump right into the topic, no? Hopefully most of you have covered this. on Canvas, no, if you just if you can, no, if you can just summarize, or what did you learn from Canvas? No, what's CARP all about? No, what's agrarian reform all about? No? And CARPer. No? Started with CARP, and then you have CARPer. Yeah. So anyone? What is it all about? What is CARP all about? Or you haven't gotten that far yet? All right. For those who joined us, now I think at least Sophia, I think you're having some connectivity issues. No? For the rest, no, Bricks, Jobel, Sophia, etc., Anika, in case you've covered this, or just based on what you know, what is CARP? What is it all about? Can someone summarize it for me? I mean, you don't have to explain everything. No? It's a complex law, but what is it all about? What's the main objective? Or you haven't gotten that far yet? Okay lang, sige. All right. So just quickly, the CARB, no, that was in the late 80s, no, during the Aquino administration, Cory Aquino administration. Um, what they tried to do, no, I mean, they wanted a lot of social reforms. So they started small, no, before CARB, no. They started, they noticed that, in terms of inequality, no, or inequality for that matter, no. You see a lot of hacienderos, no, big lands, no, belonging to a few families, and then a lot of farmers, just tilling the land, no, remaining poor, no. So they thought maybe would be good to carve out the land and give some portions to the poor. So before carp, they actually started with rice and corn fields. So they broke it up and then gave some. So carp is basically just an enhancement, quote unquote, or an expansion of that initiative. So basically, of course, there were some exemptions, no, but basically what they did is, oh, kayong mga landowners, no, the families who own large pieces of lands, no, not just rice and corn, no, we'll divide it up. We can only retain, say, 5 to 10 hectares, no, of land. No, the rest, no, we'll distribute it to farmers. They'll get your land. We'll compensate you, of course, a bit, and then we'll give it away. So each family can own 3 to 5 hectares of land. Depends on the area. Or in some cases, no, some communities um, actually had larger pieces of land. No? But like, for example, 50 hectares, pero that's given to an entire community, to 10 families, say. No? So it's a community title rather than individual title. So it went both ways. No? Individual title to the breadwinner of the family or their chosen representative, or a larger piece of land belonging to a community, many families. So deciding what to do. So that was CARP. No? So it was supposed to do asset reform. In development parlance, we call this asset reform. No? Kasi meron ding urban land reform. No? This is the rural land reform. No? So it's supposed to really give the poor an asset so that they can make it productive, and they're less likely to fall into poverty. So that was the premise of CARP. No? CARPer is just the extension. Kasi by law, no, CARP was supposed to end in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. So they needed to amend the law, no, to extend it, no, and do some programmatic changes. So that's CARP in a nutshell. No? So I think there's a video and some readings, no, on Canvas. Definitely a lot of readings, no, as you'll notice. Okay, so that's CARP in a nutshell. So hopefully some of you still, no, if you're shy earlier, no, hopefully some of you were still able to read bits and pieces of the articles and the summaries I provided on Canvas. What have you learned, no, about CARP? What have been some of the negative as positive as well as negative effects of CARP based on what you've read or what you've heard? or what you read in the news apart from the course on Canvas? What, or top of head, or guess, no? What do you think are the positives and the negatives in terms of CARP? No idea? Or just being shy, mic shy or camera shy or chat shy? Sige, I'll summarize this, but please continue learning on Canvas. Again, remember, the course is meant, no, I know this is not a major course, so maybe in terms of priorities, it's on a low priority, no? But again, the model of online learning, and this will probably change starting the next school year, no, is you learn more from the Canvas course rather than the synchronous sessions. So the synchronous sessions are meant to summarize, so you lose some of the meat. No? So it's just a summary, an abbreviated version of what you're learning on Canvas. It's supposed to supplement rather than replace your learning. So hopefully you can still, no, while we're summarizing this, hopefully you can still continue covering, no, the course on Canvas. All right, so let me summarize for you now. On the positives. All right, so many studies and articles have compared agrarian reform beneficiaries, the income, no, of ARBs, no, agrarian reform beneficiaries, and non-beneficiaries, no, farmers still. No. They examine, at least in certain time periods. No, there were the beneficiaries of agrarian reform because they got land. No? They had lower poverty rates, no, compared to their non-beneficiary counterparts. So that's a positive. So there were studies on PIDs, no, si Dr. Celia Reyes, for example, Dr. Habito came up with articles, si Rose Edilion, who you met in the earlier modules, no. And of course, the second is the poor have an asset. Remember our discussion on addressing chronic and transient poverty? Asset ownership is important in many ways because if you have an asset, then later on, if if need be, you can convert that into cash, or if it's productive, you can do something with it to earn money. And the CARP had features where government provided support services, no, free technical assistance, advisory services, no, for example, proper planting techniques, growing techniques, etc. Fertilizers, other inputs, no. In some cases, equipment, no. Not for free, no, but maybe you can rent it out or borrow it, no. They don't necessarily give you kasi mahal yun. If they're gonna give each family and a tractor, for example. So pwedeng isang catchment area, no, shared yun. So they can borrow that. On the negatives, and you'll notice, no, you'll notice on this table, there were a lot of negatives. And these are based on multiple articles, the ones I posted on Canvas. So first, no, Dr. Fabella. Dr. Fabella is an economist. He's the only economist who is also a national scientist. He's a member of the National Academy of Sciences. So very smart guy. So he had this very important think piece, no, on agrarian reform, which I posted there. I made it because it's a highly technical article. I made it optional. No? So, but if you have some time, no, it's really worth exploring it. No? So you'll learn a lot from that article. So he was saying, no, maybe he questioned some of the methodological issues, no, methodological processes of these studies. No. He was saying maybe the counterfactual. Ang counterfactual lang naman is the comparison. If you're studying econometrics, for example, sa statistics, yung counterfactual is the alternative. The non-beneficiary. Sabi niya parang medyo mali yun, or maybe he was questioning. So maybe the conclusions that they were less poor, no, was not statistically significant. Let's put it that way. The main problem, there are two main problems of CARP, no? And one of them really is, di ba akala mo you're given an asset kumbaga, you're given a car, for example, no? It's an asset. Kayo, no? Bigyan kayo ng pension ng car, no? But, oops, teka, kailangan may curfew ka, may ganito, you can only use it this time period, etc., etc. The problem with CARP, no, yes, they gave the poor. By the way, no, the lands were not free. By the way, I forgot to mention that in the earlier slide. No? So they gave the land to the poor, no? May amortization yun. So the poor had to regularly pay, no? Ano naman yun? Through a long period naman, no? Very, very generous interest rates, no? Very, very, I mean, relatively speaking, no? But maybe for them, not so, no? Very convenient payment, installment payments, no? For their amortization. So one of the main constraints, no? One of the main negatives of CARP was, yes, you're given an asset, pero, oops, there are important constraints or significant constraints. No? So one constraint is, oops, you're forced to use your land. You cannot lease it, you cannot rent it, you cannot you can, of course, cultivate land, no? You can make money out of it, no? But you can't rent it out, no? For the first 10 years that you own it. And until your loan has been paid. And another constraint is, kasi, ask your parents, so usually when Filipinos borrow from banks or financial institutions, hindi yung 5-6, no, the formal financial institutions, they ask for collateral. Usually collateral is fixed property. No? Meron na ngayong bagong law, no? They can do what they call movable property like cars, tractors, etc. So collateral is basically, in case you're not able to pay, I'll get that asset that you put up as collateral. So the problem was, no, the farmers, no, they're poor, they don't have good credit standing, credit history. They want to borrow from the bank. They want sana to use the CARP plan that they got, no, as collateral to guarantee the loan. They can't. That's not possible under CARP. So those are major constraints. Kasi going to the next piece, no, it's forced entrepreneurship, no. We give you 3 to 5 hectares. You make the most of it. You be an entrepreneur, no. Kumbaga, some families kasi, they can only cultivate part of it. Maybe they're not geared towards agribusiness. No, not everyone can be an entrepreneur like me. I can't. Give me capital. I don't know what to do with it. A lot of farmers are also like that. They can be entrepreneurial, no? So they can't maximize their land. Hindi na nga nila ma-lease, no? Some of them and many of them actually became what we call landed poor. Kasi they own asset, but yun nga, they can probably maximize parts of it, but they can't maximize the entire thing. They can't use it, they can't rent it out. It forces them to be entrepreneurs. Hindi nga nila kaya masyado. Then they're what we call landed poor. They have an asset, but it means nothing to them. Kumbaga, yeah, may asset ka, pero hindi, you can't eat the asset. No? You have to do something to convert that into a productive thing, no? Like, and earn money. So many actually, no, because some of them could not maximize it, they did not earn enough income, no. One, maybe they paid off some of the debts, no. But in many cases, the farmers, because they couldn't really maximize the land, no, it led to indebtedness. Hindi na nila mabayaran yung utang. They were supposed to pay on a regular basis to land bank, they could not. So, nagpa-pile up yun, no? Alam niyo naman, no? For those of you who have credit cards or you ask your parents, no? When you're not able to pay a certain amount, no? On your principal loan, no? May interest, no? And that adds up, no? Interest, may finance charge, etc., etc. So, it becomes a vicious cycle. No? It just compounds, no? The debt. And this is the second most important negative effect of CARP. It led to fragmentation of land. Fragmentation leads to agri-productivity loss. It goes against the principle of economies of scale. You guys are also economics majors. MECO kayo eh. It's many agri lands, no, and I look back to one of our slides. I copy pasted one of our slides from last week, no. It has been proven, no, globally and even in the Philippines, larger land sizes are more productive and are more cost efficient. It's the principle of economies of scale. No? That's really the importance, no. Kasi many companies, no, many to be more competitive, price competitive, be more efficient, no, you need larger tracts of land. So the problem was that affected the entire agriculture sector. No? Kaya nga if you read the paper of Briones, no, which I shared earlier on Module 4, if you read some of the statistics, agri, and you saw it, no, when we were discussing the sectors. No? The agriculture sector has really gone down, especially production of crops. Kasi nga, fragmentation has led to that, no? Productivity loss. No longer as productive as before. And some of the farmers could not maximize them. No? And then, the agribusiness companies, no, even if, for example, no, the farmers can lease to them, kukunti lang 3 hectares, 5 hectares. I don't want to go there. I don't want to lease it anyway. Another is capital flight. When we say capital flight, it's like lenders are either scared to lend you money, lend people in a certain area money, or they actually leave and look for greener pastures. What happened was, and it's counterintuitive, no? But the problem is, they saw that the farmers remain poor. No? Usually, banks are attracted. Kita nyo to when you go to the provinces. No? I was just in Tuguegarao for work last week. No? Kita mo yun eh. The major urban areas, no, they're peppered with banks, no? Government and private banks, kasi they follow where the money is. And the problem is, there's indebtedness, there's landed poor, the farmers could not really stay afloat, they could not solve poverty, less money. So why will banks or financial institutions stay there? No? So that's what happened. No? Areas with a lot of with a lot of land reform cases, no. Actually, what they notice is either the banks stopped or did not lend to farmers, no, or farmer beneficiaries. That's one, kasi nga they can't use their land as collateral, or they just completely left. Instead of attracting, they became a disincentive to the financial institutions. So that's a good indicator, by the way. No? If you're looking at places, if you see banks there, that's a signal that there is some prosperity there. But if there's a dearth of financial institutions, then that speaks volumes. So they left. No? They did not. Kasi nga, yun nga, wala silang pagkakakitaan, of course. And, even if farmers would want to borrow, the financial institutions will snub them. No? You don't have collateral because you can't use your land as collateral, and you're not making enough money, no? So, and you don't have good credit or borrowing history. Another negative thing was the quality of land. No? In many cases, no, alam nyo naman sometimes, no, and many times government, no, it's all about numbers, no. SONA, no, or annual reports, governments, not just the Philippines, but everywhere, no, they will report, oh, we've distributed so and so hectares of land, no, to farmer beneficiaries, or any other sector. No, they want numbers to be high. No, so sometimes what happened in the past also, no, farmers got poor quality of land. Kumbaga, sige na lang, just to report that, yeah, we distributed so and so, no? Kahit anong klase na ng land, no? Even if it's not as fertile, no? Sige, distribute na lang. So it's counted as an accomplishment. So sad, but that was reality, and that's still reality. And the last issue here, not really negative, but it's, and we'll revisit this later, no? in some cases, as I mentioned to you, no, the titles either, no, the 3 to 5 hectare lands, no, the titles went to individual families, or for larger pieces of land, they also gave it to communities. So the issue there is, well, one, you needed social capital, you needed that community to gel together and decide what to do with the land. And sometimes that led to infighting, no, akin to, no, sa'yo yan, dito yan, so walang demarcation, and we can't decide sometimes so what to do as a whole, no, with that piece of land. So there were issues there also. No? Kaya nga, ngayon, no, the thrust, no, and we'll learn later, no, is about parcelization, no, splitting it, no, para individual. So I can decide what to do with my own piece of land. I don't need to, kasi baka mama, I want to be more entrepreneurial, ayaw nung iba, I can't do anything kasi it's common property. So individual ownership yung agenda ngayon. All right. So to cap off CARP, no. So that's sort of a sad scenario, and that's it's a sad reality, no. The intentions, no. I mean, and I mentioned this during my AEA talk, no, the DECA talk before. No? In most cases, no, not all. No? In most cases, government policy making, no, they have noble intentions. No? Like this, di ba? Parang ang ganda pakinggan, no? And you know, it's very ideal, no. The farmers, instead of just being tenants, no, they now own that land and they can do what they want. The problem is with CARP, no, because of all of these constraints, no, ang maganda ngayon is, and these suggestions, no, from the articles I included on Canvas, no, these are not, there's no consensus here, by the way. These are the things that have been proposed by experts. They're not being done yet, no, that I agree with. But some economists might disagree with this. So again, there are two main issues, or three main issues with CARP. No, one is this one, no, the constraints. The second is inherently fragmentation leads to agri-productivity loss, and instead of having individual titles, have community titles. So two of the things. No, one is, this is good. The current thrust of, sorry, medyo I'll just skip back and forth. No? The current thrust of DES, we learned last week, no, is on land consolidation. So that already addresses, that's happening now. So that tries to correct this. No, of course. It's easier said than done. But so CARP, no, if you propose, you're an organization, you propose certain things, no, DA, no, in tandem with DAR, no, will give you loans, no, so that you, or even lease to you a piece of large piece of land. So may incentives, no, on land consolidation, 50, 100, 150 hectares. So, kasi nga, really, to boost agri-productivity, to be more competitive, you need larger land sizes. So that's being done now. So this is already being sort of addressed. The constraints, no, this is just a suggestion by many experts, not all. Remove the constraints to the extent possible. So give the owner maximum flexibility. So for one, you forgive the debt. Kasi what happens if you forgive the debt? So one, if they've owned it for 10 years na, they can now start making money. If they're not making money now, they can lease it out so that they can earn money, and then an agribusiness company, the real experts, no, can come in. And they can even borrow money, no, from banks, no, and use their land as collateral. So tanggalin mo yung constraints. That's one. Give the owner maximum. Maybe, kasi they're still doing this, no? So as we speak, no, they're still distributing lands, no? They haven't finished yet, no? So maybe once they own it, give it a few years din naman before they can sell it, no, or lease it, kasi baka mamaya. Diba? Let them muna, no? magkaroon ka ng konting time. Maybe 5 years, not 10 years. So give the owner maximum flexibility. And that will definitely solve poverty. And they noticed, no, they computed the total, no, in aggregate terms, the total outstanding loans, no, principal plus interest of farmers, no, it's tiny relative to the budget of government. And it's tiny from a cost-benefit perspective. It's tiny compared to the resources government has to fork out, no, just to chase after them or to administer the loan collection or the repayment collection. So medyo ano sabi nga nila it can be done, no. The Bayanihan 1, no, you guys are familiar with the Bayanihan 1 and Bayanihan 2 during the pandemic actually had provisions that forgave. Sayang nga sinasabi nila it didn't go far enough, no. It condoned or forgave the interest payments of the farmers. Hindi pa rin in-eliminate yung debt. Sabi nga nila, might as well eliminate mo na. So give them another chance, no, to bounce back. So wala, it's still not happening. So that's hopefully one way forward. And then to address the third one, the ARB, no, the individual titles versus community titles, there's now a current trust, no, which is also good, no. The DAR is, DAR is doing this right now. There's a World Bank funded project called Split. So it's trying to actually, you have a community owns a big piece of land, no, under agrarian reform. That big piece of land, they're trying to parcel it out now, no, and give individual titles to individual family members. So those three things, no. So three problems: the constraints, the fragmentation, the individual versus collective thing. Two of them are already being addressed, sort of. Fragmentation is being addressed through land consolidation, the current trust, debt condonation, parcelization, no, splitting the community titles into, no. So, again, it goes back to flexibility. I will now own my own piece of land and I can do what I want with this. And the third sana gawin, no, is to go further, no, remove the constraints as much as possible. Condone debts so the farmers can lease it, borrow, and use it as collateral, etc., etc. May sinasabi pa si Dr. Fabella, no, the principle of the coast theory, no, basically, the productive asset will go where it is optimal. Parang ano yun, we'll let the markets decide also. In this case, no, there is that market failure, but it can be corrected with following the lead of the market. So that's the short lecture on agrarian reform. So my advice, no, and this is more complex than I've explained it, no. Try as much as you can to cover the materials on Canvas. You'll learn more, no, and you'll get a deeper flavor, no, a deeper understanding of CARP and the issues. So again, might have been noble intentions, but the inherent problem plus the constraints, no, plus some of the features, no, had unintended consequences. No. The big one, which affects all of us, no, is the loss of agri-productivity. The second, it made the farmers remain poor. Yeah. All right. So that ends the first part, no, of Module 4. No? So we covered agriculture last week. Now we've covered agrarian reform. The second topic, no, and there are four, no, it goes shorter, no, along the way. No? So the longest piece in Module 4 is is agriculture and agrarian reform. No? This one is shorter, no. It's still a bit long, no, on Canvas, no, not the lecture, no. And then population demography shorter, and the shortest is the role of private sector in development. Okay, so just let me know if you have questions, no, and hopefully the rest of you won't be shy later, no, to help me out, no, in terms of making this more interactive. All right. So the main, when you say fiscal, no, because the other way of the shortcut for defining government resource mobilization and spending is fiscal policy, fiscal action. So the word fiscal, it has two elements to it. No, one is getting money, earning revenues. The other is spending money. So when you say fiscal, that's just what it means. Get money, which is revenue mobilization, the taxation side, revenue collection side, and the other is financial management and spending, government expenditure. So you earn money and spend money. So the main source, let's talk about revenues first. So the main source of revenues, as you probably know, no, are taxes. It's tax season now. So unfortunately, I have to pay taxes soon, before April 15th. So there are two broad categories in terms of taxes. One is direct tax, the other is indirect tax. So direct is income tax. That's the primary example. So I compute, I owe BIR, so a certain proportion of my salary. I have to compute that, set that aside, give that to BIR or through an authorized bank. So that's direct tax because I directly pay BIR that tax. It will become clearer when I compare it with indirect tax. Indirect tax, the most common example is value-added tax. So for example, you go to McDonald's or Jollibee, you buy a burger. For simplicity's sake, let's say the burger is 100 pesos. Makikita nyo, if you see the receipt, 12% goes to VAT. So 12 pesos. The 12 pesos is actually a tax, which is collected by BIR. But I don't have to set aside the 12 pesos and go to BIR to pay it. By me buying that burger, by that action, I've already paid the tax. Kasi part of it is value-added tax that Jollibee or McDonald's will remit to BIR. So I've paid it indirectly. Hindi yung pipila pa ako to pay it directly. So it's indirectly by another action na pahapyawan ko na, nagawa ko na. So that's indirect. So very easy to understand. Just for additional information, I think I no longer included this on Canvas. 3 principles of taxation. One is theoretical justice. The tax system should be progressive. You can't impose the same tax due or tax rates to the poor and the non-poor. So for example, the train group, I don't know if you're choosing create or train. So if you're choosing train, for example, you'll notice there's a tax table. That's been revised from previous years. So even in previous years, it's still progressive because the poorest segment don't pay any tax, 0%. They've raised it under train to 50,000 yata annually. But as you gain more income, the tax rates are higher. So that's progressive. 35 yata or more yung the richest decile, richest group, mas mataas. So ganun. So capacity to pay. You earn more, therefore you pay more. Kasi if you also think about it, parang you're also benefiting more from society in general because you're earning more. And the flip side, you have the capacity to pay. Fiscal adequacy, the tax rates should be set at the rates that that would be sufficient to cover spending. Diba? So don't some populist presidential, but for example, bababa natin tax rates. So if it's low enough, you won't earn enough revenues. It's not sufficient for your spending. Either you borrow more or you're not able to spend more or build or give or deliver services. So it must be sufficient. So the tax rate should be commensurate to what you want to do in the short run and in the long run, including pay pay off loans. And the third is, and this is important from a variety of perspectives. Administrative feasibility. The tax system should be easy. The fancy way of saying it is administrative feasibility. It should be easy for BIR to get your money. It should be easy for you to pay BIR your taxes. Kasi in the past, it shouldn't be burdensome, transparent, clear. In the past, before trade, it was complex really, especially in the if I compare the tax system, process, now and before, now I can do it fully online. And the form is very, very short. There's even they even calculated the PDF file, or there's an application actually. There's a program that you can download, and you can file it online. You can pay it online through Land Bank or other banks as well. So pwede. Before kasi it was, the forms were long, that you need multiple attachments, you need proof of this, blah, blah, blah. And dati you need to pay directly to BIR. Ngayon kasi, either online or the other banks, BPI and whatnot, both government and private. And what happens there is two things. One is people make errors. So sometimes they pay lower taxes than they should have, which is bad. Kasi government needs all the resources it can legally acquire. Second, it can lead to corruption. If it's not clear, pwede ka mag-negotiate, pwede may under-the-table deals na. And third, some people parang nat-turn off na I can't understand it, And BIR has a poor track record of running after people, so wag na lang, I won't pay. So it's bad. There's a long-running joke before, when the tax process was difficult. Parang kami na nga magbabayad ng kami na magbibigay ng pera sa inyo, pinapahirapan niyo pa kami. This is correct, di ba? Parang that's why you have to make it easy, and less corruption, Kasi in the past, not income tax, mga estate tax, etc. Speaking of estate tax, which is in the news now, dati you can negotiate pa directly with BIR, face-to-face interaction. That leads to corruption if it's not clear and transparent. So it's also an anti-corruption thing if you make it simple, less face-to-face. Ngayon, I really, for the past, this will be my third year to pay online. All right, so what's the sweet spot in terms of taxes? So here we have what we call the Laffer curve. I actually included a video from Mr. Laffer himself. I actually forgot what his first name. This is a simple concept. It's easy to understand, but finding the sweet spot is actually tricky. It's computed by economists and experts, not me, not us. So the concept is simple to understand. So what Laffer is basically saying is, if you really dumb it down, if you simplify it, don't have either too low, the tax rate should not be too low, and they should not be too high. Why? Because in both cases, government will be losing out on the revenues. So for example, if let's take the two extremes, kaya nga pa ganun yung curve. Let's take the two extremes. If the tax rates are zero or near zero, then useless. Government will not earn revenues. Baka nga they will pay more for collecting taxes than the taxes they earn. If it's too high naman, let's say 100%, people will stop working kasi government gets everything. So yun nga, good government also will not earn money if it's too high. It disincentivizes work. So ganun lang, di ba? So that's why it's less money here, kasi the tax rates are low. Dito naman, it disincentivizes work, so less taxpayers. So basically the sweet spot is somewhere in between. So again, you need economists and statisticians to compute for that. So here, this economist graphic was just saying, comparing the sweet spots for the different countries. So in France, no, because they have a lot of social services, very socially oriented, no, free healthcare, free education, whatnot, no, a lot of free stuff or subsidized stuff. No? The tax rates for the top bracket, no, and it's both optimal and the current one they imposed, no, it's at the high of 70 plus. Totoo yan, no, in tax, no, the richest group, no, they tax it very high, mga 70%. Sa US, sabi nila, supposed to be higher, pero the current, sa US kasi malakas yung lobby of the business guys, no? The rich family, especially the Republicans. So yeah. Sweden, gano'n naman. No? Baliktad naman sa Sweden, the optimal tax rate is less than that. No? So the concept is easy, but finding the actual sweet spot is trickier or tougher. Kasi you have to balance different things, no? Who will pay? Will that incentivize enough people to work? And there are other factors as well. The other main source of revenues for government are user fees. O ito, anyone, no? This is simple lang naman. No? Or by its name, no? Can someone guess or tell me what user fees are? What are user fees? How are they different from taxes? Oh, anyone? Kahit chat or unmute yourself.
Sir, I think you only pay them when you use them, like some facilities of the government.
Yes, that's exactly right. So, by its very name, user fees, it's the right to use or the privilege to use. So, you pay this thing, you pay user fees for specific benefits. No? The main examples here are toll roads. No? If you want to use the toll road, no, you pay a toll fee. So Skyway 3, for example, it's very convenient, but I have to pay 200 plus. Medyo mahal if I want to use it. SLEX, NLEX, Skyway 3. No? I should update this to include Skyway 3. Kasi taxes, once to compare it with taxes kasi once I pay, for example, my income tax or VAT through my burger, no, it's not me paying 12 pesos to have the privilege of eating the burger. No, once I remit my taxes to government, they decide what to do with it. I can't say na, oh, I'm paying this tax so that, you use it for this. No, hindi ganon. Ito kasi, it's very specific and it's pay for something. Pay for the right to use. No? Driver's license. No? And the good thing with this is it's only imposed on people who want to use it. Targeted siya. Diba? You don't tax the poor, no? Or you don't tax the, let's say, the factory worker for the construction of SLEX or NLEX. Diba? Anong gagawin niya doon? So yun, that's the difference between user fees. So that's another significant source of revenues for government. And the good thing with that, it's sort of it's supposed to cover the expenses that they incur as well, no? for providing that service. Other sources, no? Other sources, tariffs. Tariffs are just taxes, no? But they're a special kind of tax. No? They're taxes on imports. So a simple example, no? You are probably using either a laptop, a tablet, or a phone, no, while listening to my lecture or while browsing my course, no, on Canvas. With the money you or your parents paid to, let's say, Octagon or Vilman, PC Express or Lazada, whatnot, no, to buy that gadget of yours, no, part of it is our tariffs. No? So Vilman or PC Express or Lazada, sorry, I'm not advertising, top of head, or you go to Gilmore here. I live close to Gilmore, no, the LRT station. That's a PC hub as well. No? I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. So the store where you bought your gadget from, no, part of the price that you pay, no, goes to what they paid, no, to cover. It goes to them to cover the tariffs that they had to pay the Bureau of Customs when they imported or when they bought an item outside. Meron yan. So we for most imported things, no, except for, let's say, we have free trade agreements, no, for example, with ASEAN countries, no, many of the goods, not gadgets, no, many of the goods that we import from them, no tariffs, no taxes. But many, especially gadgets, no, high-end stuff, no, luxury cars, for example, the government imposes tariffs on that. There are many reasons why. No? One is revenues. Second is also to protect local industries. So in many cases, like agriculture, for example. So revenues from tariffs are also significant. No? So, and it has grown. No? So I like using charts pre-pandemic charts or figures. No? Kasi the 2020, 2021 figures are kind of weird kasi nga pandemic. No? So they're not a good illustration of the usual figures. It has grown quite a bit. No? Revenues in general have grown. No? And so have everything else, no? Including tariffs. No? So dati, it was only this. No? So it's roughly 1 out of 5. No? 1/5 or 20% of all revenues are tariffs. Roughly speaking. No? So ito, 367 divided by that. Sabihin mo ng 4 divided by 20. That's 20%. Here, same thing. It's nothing to scoff at. And it's been growing together with the growth of different sources of revenue. So it's still a major source of government revenues. So keep buying imported stuff. Just kidding. Buy both, local and imported. Other sources, no? Other sources are revenues from state-owned corporations, no? That they remit back to government, to the national treasury. So, for example, no? Sorry about my dog if you can hear the dog barking. Revenue sources, no? Other sources. No? So, the government, no? Government also has corporations, what they call GOCCs, no? Government-owned and controlled corporations. There are 53 or 50 plus, both national and local in scope. So for example, land bank, no? So government lang naman, no? The difference between GOCCs or government-owned and controlled corporations, or what we refer to generically as state-owned enterprises, they are enterprises. They run businesses, they make money or lose money. Yung government agencies kasi na normal government agencies, they don't run businesses. They basically deliver services. They implement things. They don't run business, so they don't earn profit. Itong mga to, they can earn profit. So Land Bank, for example, that's a government financial institution. DBP, LUWAD, before NFA, PAGCOR, no? They operate and authorize, regulate casinos, no? They earn money, no? The Philippine Ports Authority, PhilPost, no? Our mail service, no? That's government operating businesses. So what they do with their profit, no? If they incur profits, part of it, of course, it's to CAAP, by the way, no? And this is just a sample. No? CAAP is the one that runs and regulates airports. Civil, Aviation Authority of the Philippines. So, yon, from the profit that they earn, a part of it goes back to their business, no, to expand or whatnot, no, and to further cover operations costs, no. Then part of it they remit back to government. So again, it's nothing to scoff at. Yes, it's not even it's not even 10%, no, but it's still, sabihin na natin 69 billion of this, that's still 2%, sabihin na natin. So it's still something. It's still billions, diba? Imagine 69 billion. You can still do a lot with 69 billion. All right. So we're done with some stuff on government. Kasi nga there's two sides. So there's government revenue collection, no? Mobilizing resources, earning resource, getting revenues. On the flip side is government spending. So one important thing, no, just to go back to your basic macroeconomics, no, government spending, no, is also influences might also influences the economy. So I like using this chart. No? This is the chart that showed the worst ever, the post-war, no? The worst ever economic contraction that we experienced, no? Which is negative 16.7, I think, back in April, no? Second quarter of 2020. Kasi nga, that was the first few months of the pandemic, talagang, wow, the lockdown, or businesses shut down, etc., etc. So in that scenario, no, everything went down except government spending. So imagine if government spending wasn't there. No, this is the traditional way of computing GDP. No, C consumption plus I investment plus NX plus G. Alam niyo na yan. No? I don't need to remind you of that. So ito, government instead, kung wala yan, no, the 16.7 could have been larger, no, a larger contraction. Kasi nga, government no, had to step in, no, pay ayuda, vaccination, hospital costs, etc., etc. Support to MSMEs, etc., etc. Okay. So that's government spending for you. All right, government spending in theory and in practice, more often than not, it reflects the priorities of the administration. So here's the 2020. Again, I would like using pre-pandemic stuff because 2021 budget and 2022 are radically different. So this budget was enacted before the pandemic. Kasi usually they have to, ito lang, additional information for you guys. No? The budget has to be approved, no? Approved by Congress and signed by the President. That's how a bill becomes a law. No? Congress sends it up to the President. The President can veto it or he signs it and it's law. So the budget, the actual budget, no, that government spends for is enacted through a law. It's approved through a law. It's called the General Appropriations Act. If it's not approved before the end of the year, what happens is they use the same levels and appropriations in the previous year. So for example lang, no, if the 2022 budget was not approved before December 31 last year, no, this year we would still be using, no, until it's approved, no, we would still be using the 2021 budget. So what do you call this? It will just remain the same. So at least in the past 3 years naman, no, sorry, no, my kid was was being noisy kaya na-distract ako. So what do you call this? So where was I? No? So at least in the last 3 years, no, government has approved the budget, no, in time before the start of the following year. So ito, I'll use this kasi nga 2021 and 2022 are weird years, no? Pandemic years. Ito yung mas normal. No? You'll notice, no? You'll probably be surprised, no? Pleasantly surprised. No? And another trivia here. No? Pleasantly surprised. Oh, education number 1. No? DepEd gets the lion's share. You might be wondering, galing naman, no? They prioritize education. But you look back through all the different, through the previous years, no? Previous year's budgets. No? Education is always number 1. The budget allocated for DepEd is always number 1. And that's not because they just want it to be, no? That's intentional. Because the Constitution, no, additional information, the Constitution actually says the main focus of annual budget should be education. So it's a constitutional mandate. But again, going back to the point about government budgets reflecting government priorities, what do you notice here? Actually, in terms of sectors, no, not departments, infrastructure actually got or has been getting the lion's share. Why? The two main government agencies in charge of infrastructure build-up are DPWH, Public Works and Highways, and Transportation, DOTR. Add both of them. they're larger than 654. Not only that, in terms of infrastructure, some part of the education budget goes to infrastructure, school buildings, national defense, barracks and whatnot, headquarters or whatever, health, hospital facilities, etc., agriculture, no, farm to market roads, etc. So, agri- transportation and these two departments alone no, already surpass education, and then part of all of these departments, I would argue, no, also go to infrastructure. So the build, and that goes to my point in this administration, the main priority, apart now, no, apart from healthcare, from livelihood, and bouncing back from the pandemic, is the build program. The train law, guys, no, you know this already because the train law part of it was supposed to fund infra build up. So that's the main priority of the current government. So I ask you now, no, why do you guys think infrastructure build up is good? Or is it good? Or maybe it's bad? Why is infrastructure build up good? Any thoughts? Ideas lang.
Right, sir.
Go ahead.
I think it in theory, infrastructure buildup is good because it's a good investment to make processes faster. But alternatively, for example, now that we are in the pandemic, the budget can't be quickly allocated to health sector, for example, and quickly transfer for what is more, I'd say, more urgent issue that we have right now. So there.
So you're saying it's good, but sometimes you have to prioritize something else like health. Is that what
Yes.
you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's a good point. We'll get to that. And Don, then Francis.
Hi, sir. I think in an ideal economy or an ideal country where we have a lot of money and a transparent government, infrastructure build-up is good in a way that it can help build more jobs. For example, parang you can open parang new businesses, and then of course with new businesses, parang more people can also be employed. And even if it's not that, even for transportation, it will help yung mga workers who have to travel from other cities to go to work. So ayun po.
Thank you. All right. And Francis?
For me, sir, good with reservations. So good because I believe, sir, that infrastructure project is beneficial especially to rural areas na hindi masyado connected sa mga urban regions. Because kung nagiging connected yon using transportation and other infrastructure projects, mas na-entice yung mga businesses, both foreign and local, to build up businesses there. Kasi parang mas connected eh. Parang mas madaling mapadalhan ng supply, mas madaling parang makuhaan din kumbaga ng mga produce goods nila. Now, aside from that, nakakadagdag po talaga ng work. But like what we've mentioned sa mga earlier lessons po natin, usually, it all boils down sa execution and targeting. So, targeting is kung ito ba talaga yung dapat na priority, kung dito ba talaga natin dapat ilaan yung budget, like what Mark mentioned rin kanina. And apart from that, kung ito ba talaga yung region na may kailangan talaga ng infrastructure, and transparency din kung nagagawa ba talaga dito sa target, kung nakakatulong ba talaga sa target na to yung projects na ginagawa natin, or does the benefits outweigh the cost. And of course, yun yung execution din po, kung paano in the long run nakakaapekto yon. Kasi may mga iba po kasing infrastructure projects na parang nagiging issue rin po is yung effects sa hindi lang po sa mga communities doon, but also sa environment. For example, yung Subic, yung Clark Global City, parang naging issue rin po doon yung mga naapektuhan na indigenous areas po. So, yun po.
Very good point. Very good points. Don, did you want to say something else or you just forgot to lower your hand?
Oh, sir, I will add on to what
Go.
Francis said lang po. For infrastructure build-up to be good also, the reach should be parang hindi lang naka-centralize sa mga metro cities nga po, but also even sa mga hard-to-reach areas. So I think that's one of the problems that we parang hindi pa masyadong na-address in terms of infrastructure build-up.
Yeah. And thanks, Don. All right. Si Jobel, go ahead. Sige.
Sir, I guess just the final point to build up on what they said before. In terms of infrastructure build-up, I think there has to be two main considerations as well. One of which is having a sense of like continuation between administrations. Since we've noticed like in the past, like one president sets up this infrastructure project, it gets started out and there are promising opportunities to it. But then when another person gets seated, it gets like put on hold, or either it gets shifted to a different project overall. And I think another consideration, like given how we have observed through the years the problems when it comes to like urbanization or like building cities that are not people centered, like it's more centered on like this idea of development that we have, it's centered on roads or like structures, when in fact the most beneficial form of structure would actually be building infrastructure centered on people and how we actually move. Yes, I think that's all for me right now.
Great points, guys. Very, very good points. And thank you for sharing your ideas. No? Yeah. So a lot of issues as well. No. Let's focus on the positives first, no, before we discuss the issues. And I actually totally agree with all of your points. No. First, no, and I don't need to repeat what you've said, no, but many of you already said, no, there is an increase in economic activity, definitely, no. So directly, no. So for example, no, when they were building Skyway 3, no, I used to pass that Araneta Avenue, for example. No. You know, they employ many people. Those people have to eat. Those people have to go through. They have to use transportation. No, the construction industry had to buy from multiple suppliers. No, different subsectors, etc. So based directly, no, the construction sector and even indirectly, no, contributed to increase in economic activity. And you guys mentioned this, no? Kaya nga a lot of you said, it would be good to build it not just outside Metro Manila, be more targeted, no? Target the far-flung areas so that development can reach there, no? And we have been advocating for this, no? Did you guys know that 2/3 of GDP, no, is actually produced or earned in Metro Manila, Region 3, Central Luzon, and Calabar Zone, Region 4A. 2/3, 67% roughly, no, of GDP. And then all other regions, the rest of the 13 other regions, just make do with the 1/3. So you have to decongest Metro Manila and improve other areas as well. And one way is infrastructure. No? More infrastructure, it will entice, no? As Francis was saying, it will entice businesses to set up shop there. It's easier to move goods, no? Facilitates trade, no? Manufacturing and agribusiness as well. No? So gusto natin yan. No? And yun nga, pre-pandemic, no, NEDA had a paper, and I think I included that in the Canvas course. No? Estimated billions, no, to be added to GDP, no? Trillions pala. And again, as I mentioned, no, there are direct and indirect jobs, no? The multiplier effect. No? When you do major construction work, no, a lot of employment, direct and indirect. Kasi the suppliers themselves, no, will need to hire people, will need to buy stuff. No? So, ano yan, it's a virtuous cycle. A lot of economic activity. But there are issues. One issue that you guys raised, definitely, no, is it in terms of prioritization, no. The good thing is the government, no, has been able to earn a lot of revenue, so that the priorities are not mutually are not, you can try to satisfy different competing priorities. So for example, and in some cases you can hit two birds with one stone. So for example, health, no, you can do health infra, no, hospitals, etc. No? That's infrastructure as well, no? And it creates a lot of multiplier effects. No? Sabi nga nila, vaccine manufacturing, no? You build infrastructure for that, okay then, no? Kasi it's infra and it's health. No? But other than that, no, even if they're separate, no, I think you don't have to say one versus the other. No? Maybe varying degrees. No? You can still prioritize both. No? But it's also good, no, what you guys mentioned. No? You have to be, it has to be useful infrastructure. No? Useful kasi sometimes no, mahilig tayo before. No? And the Japanese are guilty of this before. No? They have lent us money to build white elephants. No? A large auditorium here or a center here, wala namang gumagamit. Sayang pera. Maybe just it has to be correct infrastructure. And as Don was saying, no, or si Jobel yata no, was saying, dapat it's centered on moving things and people, not car centric, no. So malaking debate yan or malaking advocacy yan on the urban development. No? So it's moving people and goods, not cars. So it's about wiser public transportation, no? Intracity and intercity. So for example, government is now doing the upgrading the rail system from Manila to Bicol. And it soon, no, it can be from all the way from Bulacan, maybe farther pa, all the way to Bicol, may rail system and the MRT systems here, etc., etc. And to the point of continuity, I totally agree with you. There was actually a proposal, no, for a bill, no, a 30-year transportation priority law. They were supposed to identify the priority infrastructure projects in the next 30 years. They wanted to enact it into law para in case there's a change in administration, walang magbabago. But Congress didn't have enough time to pass it. No, yes, Congress is on recess now. No, they will resume session right after the elections, pero a few weeks na lang. Sayang. No? So I totally agree with you. No? Sometimes infrastructure, maliban sa it's not the right kind of infrastructure. Sometimes government can just say, ay, ayaw na namin, forget it. No? And investors want continuity. You'll learn this, no, in your management classes and when you pursue corporate careers. So businesses want predictability in the enabling environment. So thank you. Very good discussion on infrastructure. So inherently it's good, but there are issues, of course. Part of it also is sometimes, no, it can negatively affect the marginalized, like yung sa New Clark City, no. So there's some tension there. No? So again, there's always trade-offs. No? Whenever government does things, especially infrastructure, some people sometimes eventually get displaced. No? The question there now is, can you modify your plan so that you don't affect larger marginalized folks? Or do you have a plan so that they're relocated, hopefully close to the same site? No? So little disruption as possible. So that's there's a lot of issues. That's another important and thorny issue on infrastructure, the relocation. Even urban poor, no, they get relocated sometimes if they're living on the fringes. Or not just urban poor, but people who have property. No, government by law can take away your property for a fee. No? And sometimes tumatagal. No? They call it right of way. Government has inherent right of way. They can take your land, but they have to compensate you. Sometimes infrastructure takes a long time because the private owner, they can go back and forth in the courts, no, to negotiate the final compensation. Skyway 3, that's what happened. That's why there were a lot of delays. No? Right of way. Hindi nakuha yung land. And they had to make adjustments because ayaw mag-budge ng ibang owners. No? Malalakas. They use the courts to delay things. All right. So now let's talk about other uses, no, of fiscal things. No? So government, no. So the fiscal, again, is all about earning revenues and spending money. Government, through those means, no, revenue side, taxation, and spending, can actually shape behavior and can influence things. So on the other side of the coin, on the revenue generating side, no, taxation can shape behavior. So the train guys know this. The sugar taxes, for example, petroleum taxes, higher sin taxes, no, it has two functions. No? It's a win-win for government. One, they can get more money, obviously, for higher taxes. Second is they can disincentivize behavior. And many countries have done this. No? Tayo, good thing we were successful in legislating higher sugar taxes. No? Sa US, for example, Mayor Bloomberg before in New York City tried to introduce it, shut down. Some people, many people in the US, no, they love their absolute freedoms. Don't tell me what my body should not have, etc., etc. And not just for people, but also corporations. It can also try to incentivize behavior. No? So in the case of CREATE, for example, no, lower tax rates, no, or maybe income tax holidays, no, that can incentivize corporations naman, no, to come over, be more attractive. So, yun. So taxation policy can shape behavior. Let's look at the other side of the coin naman, government spending. Government spending also can be used, no, to affect the economy. No? Keynes is the father of macroeconomics. No? Si Keynes kasi was big on stimulus. No? Kasi he became famous as a result of the Great Depression. No? So he theorized basically, government has a role to stimulate the economy when it's in a slump, no? Experiencing a slump. No? So we call it the Keynes multiplier effect. And you know this, no? Intuitively, you know this, no? For example, the economy is bad, no? So sa states, no? During the pandemic, they gave stimulus checks, no? Or before, no? When they had the recession in 2008, 2009, no? They gave out stimulus checks to people, no? What that does, no? It's incentivize people to spend. That keeps businesses afloat, and the businesses can retain their workers, they earn profits, they can expand their business, they can hire more workers, and the workers, circular, di ba? Virtuous cycle, they can keep buying things. No? So, it's a multiplier effect. You give me money, I spend, so it creates ripples, spillover effects. Yun nga, Keynes was famous for may exaggeration siya minsan. No? Parang, sige, government stimulus. Especially pag may economic contraction or recession. Meron nga siyang joke before. No? He was partially joking. Government should pay people to dig holes in the ground and fill them up. Even good roads. You see this in the Philippines, but not for a noble purpose. No? Sabi niya, sometimes that's even more useful, no? For the economy and for people kasi you give them jobs and money. Kahit useless siya. Tayo naman in the Philippines, joke lang. No? You see this during election time, no? It's for visibility para kita ng mga tao, government is working, or campaign money. Sabi nga nila, statistics show that only 30% of infrastructure allocations go to the project. 70% go to the pockets of many people, unfortunately. So the problem with this theory of Keynes, no, it's more muted during the pandemic. No? The problem is lockdown nga kasi, so lack of mobilization. No? Naging uso yung Google mobility trends, no, to analyze consumer behavior. No? And during the pandemic, even if government had ayuda, etc., medyo muted yung effect kasi people did not really go out. Of course, at least the pandemic created the online, more online transactions. So Grab, etc. So for the middle class, no, ayudas can help them, but it's more muted, no, during shocks like pandemics. Okay, the next topic, no, and I always like talking about this, no, because a lot of people have wrong ideas about debt. No? Guys, what do you think? No, you see this in the news all the time. No, 12 trillion, sobrang taas, will reach 13 trillion pesos. No, the grandkids of your grandkids will still be paying off the debt. Blah blah blah. Are loans bad? Is debt bad? What do you guys think? Mark and Francis, and then Jobel, and then Anika. Go ahead.
Hi, sir. I think we learned this also partially in principles of finance na there is earning opportunity when you borrow, and sometimes the interest is much cheaper than other types of investments that that are required for the return. So for example, in debt, if your return is much higher than the interest that you have to pay, edi it's good because it has the earning opportunity for the country.
That's a good perspective kasi that's the private sector perspective, no? And private sector interested kasi 'di ba you learn in your finance class, no? Do you pay with cash, with debt, with bonds or stocks, 'di ba? May mix 'yan, 'di ba? Financing options, 'di ba? Yeah, that's one way of thinking about it. So basically debt may not be bad, no, in your ano. I saw also who else? So sige, si Jobel, did you still want to speak? I don't see your hand raised anymore.
Yes, sir. I guess just to support Mark's point, I think
Okay.
that is not necessarily a bad thing since I don't know the exact figures, but I think countries much like our neighbors actually have higher debt than us, and it's not like it's as he mentioned before, it can also be an earning opportunity for us. I think it really lies on good governance and in terms of like transparency and seeing where the money is allocated rather than acquiring a lot of debt. It's more about how it's allocated and translated into the long run.
Good point. Don, Francis, then Anika. Sorry, Francis, Anika, then Don. Sige.
Sir, to ano na lang din, to add na lang din po sa nabanggit na pa nila Mark and Jobel, I believe naman po na it depends po talaga. That can be good if nagagamit po yun sa mga bagay na pwede mo pang mapalago. Yung parang sustainable na like sustainable investments na merong return po talaga. Like for example, you will use this debt para kumuha pa para sa mga infrastructure na magpapaboost sa economy or magdadagdag ng or magbibigay ng multiplier effect kumbaga. Pero like what we saw nga, I'll use an example po, like for example nung martial law. We use utang tayo ng utang sa mga bagay na like what you mentioned, sir, white elephants, yung mga bagay na hindi napapakinabangan, hindi useful, and at the same time walang balik. So right now, like what we've seen in our country, parang yun nga po yung nagiging parang nababanggit po palagi na babayaran pa yan, ganon. Hindi natin mabayad-bayaran, natitipid tayo because marami tayong utang na kumbaga mas mataas yung naging interest and kumbaga sa naging returns. Transparency din. Hindi magiging useful yung isang debt pag hindi transparent yung governments kung saan nila nilalagay yon, and kung hindi tama yung paglalagay po nila.
Okay. Great points, no? Sige, I'll emphasize some. Anika, then Don.
Sir, I agree with what the others have mentioned, but I also feel that that isn't necessarily bad as long as you have the capacity to pay for it. So at the national level, it's important then to take note of the debt to income ratio, or maybe in this case, the debt to GDP ratio then. And from the readings then po, or the module, like the rule of thumb is not to exceed at least 60%. So ensuring that we're able to pay for it, I think that's one of the measures then or metrics to be able to ensure that another loan or going into another loan is still worthwhile for the country.
Great. Thank you. You've covered, I think, the rest of my slides. Thanks. And then Don.
Also, I lowered my hand because I think they were able to mention about the
Hmm.
points that I wanted to raise.
Okay. Sige. Thank you. And thanks, guys, for your participation. So, really good points, no? And I did not, I probably should include that point in my next classes, no? So let's talk about debt first. No? Inherently, it's not bad. No? So I always use this analogy. No? So I like simplifying macro stuff and making analogies in terms of households or people. So simple analogy. No? So think of Mario and Maria, and these are like countries, no? Pero individuals. No? So Mario and Maria, no, let's say for example, no, they both, no, got, they were approved, no, to get a loan, 120,000 loan, no. Tapos yung terms ng bank, 10,000, you're supposed to pay monthly, no, 10,000. To simplify things, sabihin natin 0% interest. Of course, walang banko na rin, but simplify things. So they're supposed to pay that monthly for the year, no? So Mario, they have different income levels. So Mario earns only 15,000 a month. Maria, on the other hand, earns 100,000. No? Mas masipag daw yung mga babae, no? Mas magaling. So Maria earns more than Mario. So, obviously, who will have a harder time paying the monthly loan? Si Mario yun. So that is okay. No? Anika, actually, I heard her say it, that is okay as long as you can pay it off. No? And as others have mentioned, no? As long as it's used for the right things, no? Not the white elephants, maybe for income generating things. No? Infrastructure, for example, the country earns income, which is GDP, for example. The country earns income through that. More infrastructure, for example, lang, more trade, more taxes, etc. So the country grows, no? In general. So inherently, it's not bad. No? Debt is okay as long as you are in a good position to pay it off. Yung income lang naman of the country, GDP kasi can represent either income or the total output. No? So income siya, that's the country, the macro income. So here, no, you see that, no, sayang talaga, no. The Philippines has been doing quite well, really, no. Maniwala kayo, hindi, no. It's been doing quite well. So don't, again, going back to your assignment number 1, going back to typical social science indicators, no. Avoid just focusing on the numbers, on the magnitude, on the figures, no. Focus more on percentages, no. You've done your finance or you're studying finance, no? It's all about ratios, no? Nag-accounting na kayo. It's all about ratios as well, no? Because sometimes numbers, you don't know how to interpret that, no? It's better to compare it to something else, no? So in this case, no, 12 trillion ba? What is that? Sustainable, bad, good? You don't know. So you have to compare it to your income. So that is okay as long as you're in a good position to pay it off. So as we see here, no, debt to GDP ratio, no, debt as a proportion of GDP, it's been going down. Sayang, no, there were reforms undertaken towards the tail end of the GMA administration, more reforms during the Pinoy administration, and more reforms here. We actually had our lowest GDP, no, during this administration, 2019. Less than 40%. Record-breaking yan. Kasi numerator, denominator were doing good. No? In the numerator, debt was being paid off, no, regularly. Tapos the growth rate naman was going up. So both the numerator going down, debt going up. So talagang good forces, no, combining. Then the pandemic happened. So now we're at 60.5. So don't worry, no, yung naririnig nyo, you should not exceed 60. No, we're in that warning sign. Economists, even the World Bank, even the credit rating agencies, they're saying we're still okay. We're still okay, no, as long as hindi pa yan tumaas. 70 plus, that's the danger levels already. But mind you, some developed countries, the US, their debt to GDP ratio is more than 100%. Singapore, same thing. Japan, same thing. How is that possible, sir? Hindi naman, no? Kaya total debt to divided by GDP. It's not saying you're supposed to pay off that debt in a year's time. Hindi, spread off. So pwedeng the total debt is greater than the GDP kasi you have time naman to pay that, extended. Tayo, ganun din, same thing. Most of the loans that you have 20, 30-year repayment periods from the World Bank, etc. So that is okay as long as so okay pa yan. And we're seeing naman 2022, our GDP, the denominator will go up. Our income will go up, so okay pa rin tayo. So this will definitely go down in 2022, most likely. Hopefully, knock on wood, wala nang surge. No? So okay ng GDP. No? And I don't think we need to borrow pa a lot. No? But again, depends on the next administration, whoever will win the presidency. So again, ito nga, don't mind the ano. No? Yes, as long as you're able to pay it off, still we're okay. Don't worry. If we get to around 70 plus, etc., that's a warning sign. And proof of us still being manageable, no? There's this thing called credit rating. No? I don't know if you've heard of this. No? So credit rating can be, or a score, no? Can be given to a country, to a corporation, even to an individual. In the States, no, that's credit scoring is the norm. No? When you borrow from a bank, they don't necessarily ask you for a collateral. They compute your risk. They give you a credit score. And depends on your score, they will either approve or deny or reject your loan, or they will impose a higher interest rate kasi mas risky ka. Sa countries naman, same thing. It's a reflection of the risk of default. The Philippines, no, in the past 10 years, 5 years, no, our credit ratings have actually gone up multiple times. No? It's now what they consider above investment grade. So very, very low risk. Very, very low risk. So there are 3 international credit ratings agencies, the standard ones, no? The Standard & Poor's, S&P, Fitch, and Moody's. No? So more recently, no, they've actually maintained, even if we've reached 60 plus, they've maintained our credit rating. No? They gave some warning signals. No? But given the way the economy is now performing, everyone is going back to work, etc., I think, no, they will not downgrade it. They will maintain it, or hopefully in the future, no, if you have reform-minded president, it might even go up. So I included a short primer, no. Sabi ng boss ko na Amerikano, the word primer that we pronounce as primer is actually called primer, pronounced as primer. So ito, just remember this proof that we can still manage. Our credit ratings have been retained. Ito, last slide. What do you think of this proposal? There's an NGO, no, way back in October, and medyo nag-die down na itong proposal. Oh, they've been urging all the presidential candidates, you support cancellation of debt. Wala nang debt. Philippines, say sorry, World Bank, sorry, whatever. What do you think of this? Mark, go ahead.
Sir, I think one of the arguments against this is that if you ask the World Bank to forgive our debt, is that mas mahihirapan tayo maka loan ulit from them or other institutions. So for example, if may time na magkaroon ulit tayo ng crisis, mahihirapan tayo maka loan ulit and to help our situation.
Great, good answer. Don, then Don, did you raise your hand? Sorry. And then Francis. Or I think you lowered your hand. Sige, Francis muna.
Sir, siguro aside from dun nga po sa mahirap na mangutang ulit, siguro yung tiwala din ng mga foreign investors sa bansa natin, siguro magda-die down din because they know us as someone na nag-default. So parang isipin nila na mas pe-preferan na lang nila yung ibang bansa na parang mas malakas yung credit rating or mas maganda yung standing nila sa World Bank. So yun po.
Perfect. Don, yes, sige.
Sorry, my mic was not working earlier.
Okay. No
but I think another problem would be if they allow it for us, they would have to allow it for other countries as well. So parang mahirap if you make it like a case-to-case basis na, okay, we allow the Philippines for now. Parang it would be harder to parang make it standardized now for all countries as well in the future.
That's a good point as well. So you guys raised very good points. So it's frankly, it's a stupid idea. No? So one, it assumes that we no longer need to borrow now and in the future. But that's stupid because kung developed countries na, and even rich corporations, as you guys mentioned, like Ramon Ang needs to borrow money for his airport. Countries will, even developed countries will need to borrow. And sometimes it's strategic not to to balance the different kinds of debt or sources of financing. And yun nga, either they will no, it will be more difficult for us to borrow more money in the future, or if we get to borrow more money, chances are the interest rates will be much higher kasi yun nga, you're more risky now kasi we've proven. And then investors also, they don't like governments that don't uphold agreements or contracts. And then lastly, no, as Don mentioned, no, parang it's bad for, let's say, the likes of the World Bank, parang, other countries might copy it. Yeah. So yeah, so that ends our discussion on fiscal. No? At least you guys seem interested in that discussion. Not agrarian reform, which may have been more technical no, in terms of content, no? At least on Canvas. Ayun, so any other inputs, questions? Yes, go ahead, Francis.
Sir, with regards po sir sa loan, kasi meron na parang 'di ba po pag kunwari yung tao parang tayo po mga household pag nangungutang parang may mga collateral para lang kunwari eto ipapasangla ko to para makakuha ng pera itong bahay ko or itong sasakyan ko. Is it applicable also sa mga countries like may collateral? Especially sa World Bank or sa mga other bansang nagpapautang sa kanila like China. And ano
Not
pong example?
Not World Bank. Usually ano yan the bilateral countries, yung mga individual countries like China, for example, no, you've heard news no na they lent money. Nasa agreement naman in terms of agreement. They lend money to this let's say African country. They defaulted, so now China gets property or something. France, may ganong agreement din. I was surprised, no? Nagpautang sa atin yung France. Part of the agreement also said, no, we can negotiate that certain property, pero walang collateral to speak of na ito nakasangla, no. This you're able to get this, no. Rare yun, but in some cases yes, no, it can be specified. No? So China nga, sabi na stay away from China kasi sometimes they can even, no, kasi confidential yung mga contracts. Many people are not privy to what they contain. Pero sometimes they can even indicate what they will get in return if you default. No? Sa atin wala naman. The French, the Chinese naman, I think pag-uusapan pa. In case there is default, then ito makukuha. But we're far from that. But yes, it is possible. It is possible. Not collateral, but to get property. So parang na rin collateral if you think about it. Yep. It is. Yeah. Utang di ba? So yeah, from a macro perspective, household, sometimes the things are the same. All right. Any other questions? Don, go ahead.
Oh, sir, not a question. Not a question about our discussion today, but I think sa Canvas under the government spending page, the video that explains how budget is formulated and enacted to law is unavailable po.
Okay. Sige. I'll try to correct that. Baka wala na. So I'll try that. Sige. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll fix that. All right. Any other inputs, guys? All right. Thank you for your active participation in the fiscal side, the fiscal part of the discussion. Have a good dinner. Have a good evening. I'll see you guys next week, hopefully. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Yes, sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.